CIA Director William Burns is reportedly in Doha, Qatar, for the talks on the Israel-Hamas war. A Qatari foreign affairs official says the situation in Gaza is dire and has called on the international community to push Israel to commit to a permanent ceasefire.
The images coming out of Gaza, the level of death and destruction that we are seeing is unparalleled. It's been a really long time since we've seen such levels of destruction, and we cannot, as an international community, stay silent and just hope for this war to end on its own. We have to do all that we can. I can tell you, my dear, that now there are corpses being eaten by dogs in the streets in Gaza. This is not something that in the 21st century we should be accepting as a human community of this world. It's mainly a humanitarian issue. Our focus should be on the humanitarian side of it. Our main focus was to get those who we can get home to their families as soon as possible and safeguard those who are at risk. And therefore, we are very thankful that we were able to send those back to their families, including the South African citizen yesterday. And we hope that we can do more on that. But the main goal here is for de-escalation to happen and for us to reach a situation where we can end this war and start a viable political process. This is a cycle of violence. It did not start on the 7th of October. It is a result of decades of occupation that has put the Palestinian lives always as second in priority to the lives of others. And we need to make sure that we humanize the conflict and we decide collectively as an international community to pressure both sides, and especially Israel, to stop the bombardment, stop the current war, and move towards a lasting peace.
Well, let's talk about this now with Professor Abel Esterhuyse, who is with the Stellenbosch University's Department of Strategic Studies. Good evening to you, Prof, and thank you for your time. The UN and others would like to see this temporary truce result in a full ceasefire. As we've been hearing, there's some ideas around what it would take to secure that. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think this is the beginning of a peace process. Of course, it will be important to build trust and to keep all the parties, involved in the process. But I'm quite convinced that we're sitting at the beginning of a process that will lead to. I'm encouraged, and I should. Fact that the peace is broken, the Middle East itself is.
All right, are we struggling really with that line? I know as I'm having difficulties, our viewers would again. Let's just try and recap that question, Prof, or maybe for you to start again with your response to my question around what it would take to achieve a ceasefire. If we're able to have a stable line, we'll continue. Otherwise, we'll try and reestablish with you. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's quite encouraging that it is coming out of the Middle East, that it is a peace process that's been developed within the region. And I think this is the beginning of a process that is to eventually lead to peace. Hopefully they will be able to keep all the parties to the conflict involved in the process. And so, yeah, eventually I hope that this will sort of unfold in a bigger peace process. But it's quite encouraging that this is coming from within the region, that it is also a reflection of the trust that has developed between Israel and its neighbors over the last couple of years.
Our viewers, Prof, have heard a lot about calls for a two-state solution, an independent state of Palestine alongside the state of Israel. Given the disputes about what that boundary should be and the stated position of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to continue with the central goal to eliminate Hamas, and we've seen that definition resulting in mass civilian deaths, the destruction of hospitals, schools and places of worship, is this remotely possible?
Well, I think one has to give the negotiation process a chance to play out. I am absolutely convinced that eventually they will be able to work out some form of a settlement that will be acceptable to both the Israelis and the Palestinians. One of the critical things for me, beside the historical realities that we are dealing with here, is perhaps the psychological and the spillover experiences of what unfolded the last 6-7 weeks. And in particular, the radicalization of the two parties to the conflict. This is the kind of conflict that eventually plays into I almost want to say, a demonizing of the adversary. And this is happening on both the Israeli and the Palestinian side. So if you then start off with negotiations, it's a long path to finding each other in a sort of midway and to come to a peace resolution.
That was really going to be my next question. Given what you've said now and the mediation efforts that have resulted in the extension of the truce, it seems as if there's still room to talk, and as you say, heartening to see that it's coming from within the region itself. Given what you said, and maybe the answer is already a foregone conclusion, do you see both sides coming to the negotiation table?
Well, from a theoretical perspective, I have no doubt. Wars always end around the negotiation table. So from a theoretical perspective, I have no doubt that eventually Israel and the Palestinians will have to sit down and they will have to work it out. We often forget that in the beginning of the 1970s, late 60s, 70s, we had a major war between Israel and its Arab nations, and we've developed and seen peace unfolding between Israel and its Arab nations in the last 20, 30 years. And I think this is perhaps what will eventually happen between Israel and the Palestinians. It will not be a quick fix. It will take some time. But I'm absolutely convinced that eventually the warring parties will have to sit down and negotiate, and that eventually they will have to find a solution that is acceptable to all the parties involved.
Well, you talked about warring parties. Right now, that's Hamas and Israel. Where do you see this in relation to the inclusion of Fatah, the Palestinian Authority?
Yeah, I think this is part of the problem at the moment for Israel, is the question as to who to talk to. And it's perhaps part of the Palestinian problem as well, that there are so many different Palestinian groupings to talk to. So this will, I think, be very critical for the Palestinians to also get themselves together and to form a united front in the negotiation process. So I think this is important, that the Palestinians come together, that Israel Israel knows who it's talking to, and that's just part of the trust building exercise that will happen between the two warring parties.
Well, thank you very much for sharing your insight with us, Prof. We appreciate it so much. Professor Abel Esterhuyse from the Stellenbosch University's Department of Strategic Studies.